Hey guys, I'm going to ask you a few favors before I get started. One, turn up the volume. It's very early in the morning before I go off to work. So I got to keep my voice down. Number two, please subscribe because whenever I defend the Pope, he doesn't need defense, but whenever I say nice things about Pope Francis, I always lose a bunch of subscribers. And last night I felt led to make a video about Pope Francis, and just overnight I lost like a dozen subscribers. So if you like what I say, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you nothing, just hit that subscribe button, but it helps getting more views, getting the algorithm out so more people could see our message. And also, we like to get guests on, and they look at how many subscribers people have before they say yes. So the more, the better. So yeah, just hit the subscribe button. I thought I had something else to ask you, but I guess they're the only two things I have to ask you to do. So last night in the video, I had said there's a big difference between getting smashed in the face with a beer bottle, getting stabbed with a switchblade, and rolling around in a jiu-jitsu gi. And I said this from first-hand experience. I've been smashed in the face with beer bottles. I've been stabbed and sliced with switchblades. And I've rolled around on a jiu-jitsu mat. And so when I say Pope Francis is a fighter, fighters can recognize fighters. There's certain things you could tell. And so that's the point I was making. And when I defend Pope Francis, I get accused of being a liberal, which is laughable because I've been a conservative longer than most of these guys criticizing me have been alive. And I'm 100% MAGA. And when it comes to the Catholic Church, I'm 100% Orthodox. I consider myself a conservative Catholic. Although in Catholicism, if you are conservative, you realize it's not a political institution, it's the church, it's the body of Christ. So either you're Orthodox or heterodox. Either you believe what the church teaches, either you're in union with the Pope and the Magisterium, or you're not. Either you're heterodox or Orthodox. So in this video, I'm going to give you the greatest achievements of Pope Francis because the liberal media is not going to talk about it. And a lot of Catholic media that grifts off of Pope Francis isn't going to talk about it. So I'm just going to give you the facts and you can decide, because I submit to you, Pope Francis is not a liberal. I get people in the comments, I don't get you. You seem conservative. Why do you support a liberal Pope? Because he's not a liberal Pope. The devil has lied. This is my point that I make. The devil has lied. In fact, Pope Francis has said abortion is the gravest of mortal sins. This is why if you're Catholic and you're buying or selling real estate, you must go to realestateforlife.org. Because as a Catholic, we have to be responsible with our money. Our money belongs to God. So if you're paying a real estate company commission and fees that they rightly deserve, or workers, due his wages, the Bible says, you need to be giving it to a pro-life real estate company. And the only pro-life real estate company out there right now is realestateforlife.org. Pro-life owners, pro-life realtors. That's it. But on top of that, I've dealt with these people. They helped me get a house. I tell you the funny story, I couldn't get a mortgage. I had gotten laid off from a couple jobs and went down to the bank, and the banker's like, "Sir, there's people on death row with better credit scores than you." And a real estate for life agent in my church showed me this simple secret. It's so simple. I don't know why everybody isn't doing it. And my credit score shot up 100 points in like 2 months. And all the other mortgage brokers were also, all the people I was dealing with, the real estate agents, all they did was say, "Oh, you got to get approved for a VA loan because you got no money to put down." But even with a VA loan, my credit score wasn't high enough. So in addition to him shooting my credit score up, he worked with me. He was with me from the beginning to the end. He was calling realtors. He said, listen, and these guys are like experienced. Most of these guys are very experienced, so they have connections. He's like, listen, this is my old friend from this mortgage company. He said, all you need is this. And I far surpassed it with his little technique. So these real estate for life realtors, they're the best, man. They're gonna walk with you. They're not, a lot of these real estate guys, they take a course and, they do it for a part-time gig, make some extra money. And all they care about is listing your house, and letting somebody else sell it and they get the commission. These guys really care. They're Christians. They're all Christians. And they're gonna walk with you. And we became best of friends. He's like one of my closest friends now, and one of my spiritual advisors I go to for advice, honestly. realestateforlife.org. So before I get to the criticism, and I'm going to go with like the top 3 criticisms of Pope Francis. 2 of them are outright lies. One of them is true, like what they accuse him of is true, and I'll explain that. And then I'll explain the lies and why people believe it, because the average Catholic don't have time to do the research, Me, it's just something I like to do is research, just like the media has half of America believing Donald Trump is racist. I know he's not because I've done my research, I don't care what they say. So just like some in Catholic media tries to paint Pope Francis as a liberal or a heretic, he's not. I've done my research. I don't care who it is. I don't care if you got a PhD behind your name. You're lying. And then good Catholics are believing you because they're like, and the reason good Catholics believe these grifters on YouTube is because they would never dream of lying about a pope. So like, this must be true. So Pope Francis' biggest achievement in my view was, according to Jason Berry, if you're not familiar with Jason Berry, he is the journalist who, investigative journalist back in the day, uncovered the gravest, the worst crisis in our church history, the abuse of little children. And because of his investigation, they made that movie Spotlight, and millions of Catholics left the church. And it was a great sin of the church. According to Jason Berry, Pope St. John Paul II did a good job in getting the numbers down, getting under control. Pope Benedict continued getting the numbers down, getting under control. He said, but Pope Francis are head and shoulders above these 2 popes and ended the crisis. And, numbers don't lie. You could listen to all the rhetoric from the mainstream media, or Sarah Palin used to call them the lamestream media. And you can listen to these Catholic grifters telling you how horrible, we're in a crisis. One guy even made a magazine, Crisis, because he thinks the church is in a crisis. Well, if you think restricting the Latin Mass is a greater crisis than abusing little children, your brain is in a crisis. So these are the numbers since Pope Francis has been Pope. So you imagine pre-Vatican II, when we had all these liberal priests, they were in the thousands every year. And then the Pope St. John Paul II, he got them down to double digits. Pope Benedict kept them in double digits, like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Since Pope Francis has been Pope, we'll go from 2013, seven, single digits. Pope Francis got them down. Child abuse allegations down to 7. 2014, 6. 2015, 7. 2016, 2. 2017, 6. 2018, 3. 2019, 8. And in 2023, there were 3. Now that's 3 too many. And I believe it was 1 priest involved in all 3 allegations, and that priest should be severely punished. But compare that to the Chicago public school system. One city, there were over 3,000 public school teachers in Chicago alone in 2023 that had serious child abuse allegations against them. So, and I got this from Bill Donahue, The Truth About Clergy Sexual Abuse, Clarifying the Facts and the Causes. Great book. He gives you all the statistics. I mean, government statistics, church statistics. It's very well sourced book. So that was the greatest crisis. When I was a Protestant anti-Catholic, I used that against you guys so much. I would have never dreamed I would be Catholic because of this abuse. But then when I realized, Boz Tjidjian, the late evangelist Billy Graham's grandson, who's a devout evangelical Protestant and who was a state attorney down here in Florida, ahead of the sex crimes unit, and now he specializes in religious sexual abuse. He said in Protestant churches, even at the Catholics' worst, the Protestant sex abuse crisis is 2 to 3 times higher. And this is a Protestant talking, and he was telling other Protestants, we got no room to talk badmouth the Catholics. Pope Francis has ended this horrible crisis. So that achievement alone, I'd say make him a saint, because that was the worst thing that this church has ever done. But the devil tries to play this, if you've ever been in Manhattan, these 3-card Monte, you have to pick where a card is, or the shell game. They put a shell under one cup, and they move the cups around. And these guys are good at getting your eye away from the actual thing that you're picking. And, they hustle for money. And these grifters on YouTube are hustling for money. Like, oh, look at this. He's restricting the Latin Mass. Oh, look at this. And they just throw so much at you. Like, oh, this guy's horrible. He's the worst pope ever. We're in a crisis. And we don't take the win. We don't take the win. The greatest crisis in the church is over. And the second thing he did when he came in, there was a huge bank scandal. There were scoundrels in the Vatican laundering money. You don't hear about that anymore because that he solved that crisis, Number 3, one of the greatest things, I've done several videos on this, and older people in the church tell me, yeah, I see it myself. Under Pope Francis, our seminarians graduate and become a priest are by far the most conservative than in the past 100 years. According to a couple polls, one was by Notre Dame University, which is not a liberal, not a conservative university. They're Catholic in name only, I think, at this point. And the other one escapes me, but the Pillar actually had an article citing all the sources, but it's easy to look up. They said pre-Vatican II priests, that they interviewed in 1965, 90% of them describe themselves as progressive politically and religiously, progressives, liberals. 2023, they said there was virtually none, less than 3% describe themselves that way. In fact, 75% describe themselves as very conservative politically and very conservative and orthodox religiously. So under Pope Francis, this liberal, everyone's calling liberal, we have the most conservative clergy we've ever had, other than the, going back. But I'm saying in modern times. And it's no accident. You see, Pope Francis was criticized a few years ago because he told Italian bishops, if you see a hint of femininity, even if these guys tell you they're not gay, don't let them into seminary. This is what he told them. And they had to clarify that. They're like, well, Pope St. John Paul and Pope Benedict said if it was just like a little thing they had when they were a teenager, it was like a fleeting thought, but they overcame it and they never acted on it, and they don't promote it, and they're celibate, and they haven't even thought about it for years. And the bishop thinks that these guys are on fire Catholics, they're for real. Can we let those guys in? And Pope Francis said, yes, do what Pope Benedict said. And of course, Catholic YouTube grifters twisted it as like, oh, he's going to allow gay priests, Another great thing he's done, he's become very close to Eastern Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew. In fact, we're going to be celebrating Easter together for the first time in I don't know how long, Catholics and Orthodox. And people that like watch these Orthodox and Catholic talks, that we're closer than ever in modern times of us becoming one again. You know, I think it was Pope St. John Paul II that said, you know, the Eastern Orthodox are like the left lung and the Catholics are the right lung. We need both to survive. We're getting to that point where we'll be in the same body again. The schism may be over thanks to the hard work of this fighter Pope Francis. One other great achievement. Well, I came back under Pope Francis, number one, because I seen the child abuse scandal in Protestantism was worse. Pope Francis has ended it in the Catholic Church. But number two, he spoke my language. He reached out. He's an evangelistic Pope. He may not be the greatest theologian, but he's a great evangelist and great pastor. And he led me, but not only me, armies, tens of thousands of evangelicals back into the church. In fact, under Pope Francis' time, the Catholic Church has grown 9.9%. We can just say 10%. And people say, well, you know, that just kept up with church growth. Well, I mean, world growth, people just being born into the church. No, world growth during that time was only 9%. So he outpaced world growth. And the world is becoming more secularized and more atheistic, because the Southern Baptist, the largest Protestant denomination at that time, when he became Pope, there were 16 million members. Today, there's only 12 million members. The second largest Protestant denomination, United Methodist Church, like lost 50% of their members in this amount of time. So it's another great achievement, the growth of the church by Pope Francis. And, you know, I'll get to the criticism. Oh, he's a liberal. He stacked the College of Cardinals with all these liberals. But at the same time, these same peoples will say, you know, in Africa and Asia, they're more conservative. Well, the fact is he put more African and Asian cardinals by far into the College of Cardinals, by far. So you can't have it both ways. Either you're stacking the College of Cardinals with Africans and Asians, where they're all conservative, or you're stacking it with liberals. You can't have it both ways. So you have to think these through, and you have to look at the facts. Then they call him a liberal himself. You know, I heard in the beginning he's going to allow same-sex marriage early on. The media heard this and they were hopeful. The media wants him to be a liberal. That's why they don't report on his conservative stuff very often. And the media asked him in 2012, are you going to allow same-sex marriage? He's like, no, marriage is between one man and one woman. God instituted marriage. No pope can change that. No church can change that. Then, the rumor was he was going to ordain women. Associated Press again asked him, will you ordain women? He said, Jesus chose 12 men. No church can change that. In fact, one of his first priests he excommunicated was a guy named Father Greg Reynolds for advocating ordaining women, saying we should ordain women. And they warned him, you can't say this. He said it again. Pope Francis excommunicated him. And then Pope Francis took it a step further and changed canon law to make it a crime, punishable by excommunication. If a bishop ordains a woman, they're both excommunicated. Oh, well, he's going to bless same-sex unions. Well, May 23rd, 2023, he wrote a letter to the cardinals. No, the church cannot bless same-sex unions because God cannot bless sin. He's all in on this transgender thing. He said on numerous occasions, too many to cite here, transgenderism is demonic. Another quote, transgender ideology is demonic. So these are lies. People hate Pope Francis based on lies, just like a lot of Protestants hate the Catholic Church based on lies, I could go on and on. I've made so many videos debunking these lies that they say about him. I got to keep an eye on the time because it's getting to 5:00 in the morning. I got to leave here in a few minutes. But I'll give one criticism that is true, that a lot of these people don't like. But this is the reason they don't like him, because he's restricting the Latin Mass, and they think this is so evil. Well, Pope Saint Paul VI instituted the Novus Ordo Mass because he wanted to go back, because Vatican II said we need to go back to our tradition of the early church, the first 3 centuries. And, when I came back to the Catholic Church, I was amazed. When I walked into a Novus Ordo Mass, I just felt the presence of God. Tears came from my eyes. Everything was so scriptural. Everything was right out of the Bible. I was like blown away. Everything the priest said was like he was quoting scripture. Every prayer we prayed was right out of the Bible. Every song we sang was just Bible, Bible, Bible. And as a Bible-believing Christian, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And then I remember Googling what the Mass was, because someone said, yeah, the Mass has never changed. I'm like, it never changed. They meant 90% of it didn't change. There's always little changes, So I look in 150 AD, look it up, 150 AD, St. Justin Martyr describes the Mass, and it's like identical to the Novus Ordo Mass. It's identical. They speak the language of the people, they take communion in the hand, and they follow the rubrics, I guess you call it. It's like the step-by-step of the church. It's like, wow, it is identical. And, but these people are mad because Pope Francis is restricting the Latin Mass, is what they call. But it's actually the Missal of 1962, but they call it the Latin Mass. But there's also some actually prefer, like the Sedevacantist, like Mel Gibson, prefer the Missal of 58 because it was changed from 58 to 62. And there's been changes. I'm not going to go through them all, but I counted like dozens. And I've heard there was hundreds of changes to this Latin Mass since, they started doing it in Latin in the 5th century. But they did it in Latin because the whole world spoke Latin, So they wanted the church in unity. That was the purpose. The church would be in unity. We're praying the same prayer in the same language. But now that the world speaks so many different languages, we don't have like an official language for the world. Saying, let's go back to the first 3 centuries when the apostles and their successors just basically evangelized the whole world, speaking the language of the people. So that was the purpose. And then Pope St. John Paul II, allowed it because there were groups that just wanted. So he allowed the Lefebvre and his little group, the SSPX, to do it. But then when the SSPX disobeyed, when Lefebvre disobeyed St. John Paul II and called him an antichrist and ordained 4 bishops without the Pope's approval, he excommunicated Lefebvre and those bishops. And then he's like, okay, they're using this as the divisive, not for unity. And the goal of the bishops and the cardinals and the Pope is unity. So he started restricting it. Then Pope Benedict said, maybe if I give these guys an olive branch and be less restrictive, they'll come back in the unity with the church. But he said it did the opposite, and Pope Francis seen it did the opposite. It made them feel superior, and you have people literally saying the Latin Mass is superior to the ordinary Mass that 90% of us go. They're the super Catholics. We're just the Novus Ordo Catholics. We really don't know tradition. And in fact, you have Kennedy Hall, who actually said this on more than one occasion. I played the video here several times. The Novus Ordo Mass, the ordinary Mass that the church approves and 90% of us go to, is intrinsically evil. So it's not just evil, there's some evil where you can fix it. Intrinsically evil, saying there's no good. There's no good, you can't fix it. So he's saying, this is a popular YouTuber, Kennedy Hall, saying the Novus Ordo Mass, where we receive the literal flesh and blood and full divinity of Jesus Christ, is intrinsically evil. There's no good. In fact, he had a video titled, I'd rather die than participate in the Novus Ordo Mass. He changed the title, but he still says it in the video, and he quotes some SSPX bishop or priest that says the same thing, basically. And that's why he says it public, because he belongs to the SSPX, and that's their official teaching. Now, there's other guys that don't belong to SSPX, but they believe it, and they just don't say it. They just make fun of the Novus Ordo. They'll talk about a clown mass that happened 50 years ago. And, just like Protestants will pick out, you know, a bad Catholic here, a bad Catholic there, to say, oh, the Catholic Church is evil. This is what these guys do to us ordinary Catholics, us regular blue-collar guys that go to the ordinary Mass, to the Pope. This is what they do. So Pope Francis, seeing this division it was causing, and this is why he restricted it. Now, you could disagree with him restricting it. He didn't ban it. It still takes place, you know. And not all people that go to it feel this superiority complex, you know. In fact, I had Keith Nestor on. This is the most non-judgmental Catholic. He's like an example to me. He's like one YouTuber I try to emulate, but, you know, I'm me and he's him, so we're a little different. But he would never criticize the Novus Ordo. He just said he prefers the traditional Latin Mass, and he's saddened that Pope Francis is restricting it. That's a valid opinion. But to judge the man's heart, Pope Francis' heart, and saying he wants to restrict it because he's evil, because he's demonic, these are the kind of things that people say, Catholics say on YouTube about Pope Francis. That's just wrong. He tells us straight up, there's no ambiguity. He tells us straight up he wants to restrict it because Pope Benedict allowed it to bring more unity, but the devil and these Pharisees are using it to bring division. And Pope Benedict agreed with, he said he was saddened that Pope Francis had to do that, but he understood to restrict it. Now again, most, I'm sure, you know, every Latin Mass goer that I meet personally isn't like that, but these loudmouth YouTubers, you know, that talk about Pope Francis like he's some punk on the street, and that's what led me to say, you know, he's a fighter. They would have never said this to him when he was a bouncer, a tough Italian bouncer. You know, just because maybe they take a jiu-jitsu class and they roll around. You know, I've taken jiu-jitsu classes, and, you know, I'm telling you this. If you were to pull me into a guard in a bar fight, and if you don't know what the guard is, it's a great move. If it's one-on-one and there's a referee making everything fair, it's a great move. You get, the guy can't move, and then you can work whatever you want to work, any kind of submission. But if you were to pull me in the guard and hold me where I couldn't move in a bar fight, on the ground, my friends would be bashing your head in. So that's what I'm saying. There's sport, the UFC, jiu-jitsu, and then there's reality, fighting in a bar like Pope Francis did. And these guys talk about Pope Francis like he's a wimp, and he's got more toughness in his pinky than all these YouTubers criticizing him put together, in my humble opinion. It's like I said, fighters recognize fighters. And then the claim he's a modernist. So he's a modernist, and so what's a modernist? Basically, a modernist is like a liberal. They say, well, you know, we can change doctrine because, you know, this was for this time frame, you know. And Pope Francis has said over and over and over, he cannot change doctrine. When they asked him if he was going to change the marriage doctrine, no, I can't change doctrine. That was instituted by Christ. Are you going to ordain women? No, I can't change that. Over and over, even the synod. Remember, they had everybody's hair on fire. The synod is going to change everything. They're going to ordain women. Nothing happened because it was a listening. They wanted to see what the church had, the people in the pews were thinking. They wanted to hear our spiritual needs. And Pope Francis said, no doctrine will be changed here. This doesn't even have the authority to change doctrine. It's just a listening to the body of Christ. And in our parish, we were able to tell our priests our spiritual needs, and he passed them up to the bishop, that passed them up to the Pope. And this is what they were reviewing, you know, and they instituted a lot of our needs. We said we want more adoration, more confession time, more Bible studies, and we got them. The priest listened and got it. That's what it was. That's what the synod on synodality was. But these grifters on YouTube have everybody's head on fire. Oh my God, the synod's going to change everything. And it didn't. It's just like the liberal news, you know, telling us Trump's a threat to democracy, and these liberals are going crazy. And you see, we're freer than ever. He's the one getting rid of censorship on and freedom. You know, he's the one encouraging freedom of speech. The same thing, you know, same thing. You're being gaslighted. If you think Pope Francis is a modernist, you're being gaslighted. So what is the definition of modernist? Like I said, it's someone who wants to change doctrines. And he said he couldn't. He said he couldn't. And this was one of the reasons I came that attracted me to the Catholic Church. I'm like, you know, a pope is more restricted than a pastor of a church. A pastor of a church said, oh, I discovered something in the Bible I didn't see. You know, like Carmen, one of my favorite contemporary Christian artists, the late Carmen, the singer, forget his name, got a long Italian name. I can't believe I forgot his name. But his pastor that he loved said he discovered in the Bible there's no hell. Carmen said, man, I love this guy, but he's teaching heresy. I got to leave his church. You know, we can't do that. The Pope cannot change anything a prior Pope has done. So when it comes to doctrine, when it comes to morals. Now, disciplines we can change, you know, do we not eat meat on Friday? Do we fast all day on Friday? These are disciplines. Can priests be married? These are just disciplines. These aren't doctrines. Doctrines were handed down by Jesus and his apostles. Disciplines is you know, the church binding and loosing. We can bind, we can loose disciplines. But they get this word modernism from a great saint, Saint Pius X, and he tells us how to see modernists. You want to spot a modernist? He wrote a letter to his priests showing them how to spot a modernist. I'm going to read this letter, and I submit to you, the people that are calling Pope Francis a modernist are the modernists, just like the Democrats called Trump a dictator, and it turned out they were the dictator. You know, just think about the pandemic. These Democrats were running their states like dictators. Thank God I live in the free state of Florida. If you want to come here, go to realestateforlife.org. But this is what they do. They project. It's called projecting. What you are, they say they are. It's an old communist tactic. You know, accuse the enemy of what you are. You know, the issue is never the issue. They use all the communist tactics. So this is Pope Pius X. It's not that long, but it's important you listen to this because he's the guy they quote. You know, the SSPX, who really hates Pope Francis, who are still in schism. You know, they're named after him because they think the church went to modernism. You know, so they love this guy. But this is what the saint said. Distracted with so many occupations, it is easy to forget the things that lead to perfection in priestly life. It is easy for the priest to delude himself and to believe that by busying himself with the salvation of the souls of others, he consequently worked for his own sanctification. At last, not let this delusion lead you to error, because no one gives what he does not have. And in order to sanctify others, it is necessary not to neglect any of the ways proposed for the sanctification of ourselves. The Pope is the guardian of dogma and morals. He is the custodian of the principles that make families sound, nations great, souls holy. He is the counselor of princes and of people. He's the head under whom no one feels tyrannized because he represents God himself. He is the supreme Father who unites in himself all that may exist that is loving, tender, divine. It seems incredible, and I agree with this 100%. I'm like, wow, it seems incredible and even painful that there be priests to whom this recommendation must be made. But we are regrettably, in our age, in this hard, unhappy situation of having to tell priests, love the Pope, with an exclamation point. And how must the Pope be loved? Now, this is radical. This is very traditional. So listen, this is rad trad stuff right here. Real rad trad, not the fake rad trads. Therefore, when we love the Pope, there are no discussions regarding what he orders or demands, or up to what point obedience must go, and in what things he is to be obeyed. When we love the Pope, we do not say that he has not spoken clearly enough. He's so ambiguous. Almost as if he were forced to repeat to the ear of each of us the will, each one, the will clearly expressed so many times, not only in person, but with letters and other public documents. We do not place his orders in doubt, add in the facile pretext of those unwilling to obey. That is not the Pope who commands, but those who surround him. We do not limit the field in which he might and must exercise his authority. We do not set above the authority of the Pope that of other persons, however learned. Oh, he's got a PhD in philosophy. Who dissent from the Pope, who even though learned are not holy, because whoever is holy cannot dissent from the Pope. This is Pope St. Pius X. This is the cry of a heart filled with pain, that with deep sadness I express, not for your sake, dear brothers, but to deplore with you the conduct of so many priests who do not allow themselves to debate and criticize the wishes of the Pope, who not only allow themselves to debate and criticize the wishes of the Pope, but are not embarrassed to reach shameless and blatant disobedience. Like, I'm amazed at some of these clergy that like bash and slander the Pope, and it's like, you're not even ashamed? You're wearing a clerical thing and you're not even ashamed? I agree. Pope St. Pius is the 10th. St. Pius X is on point. This is the cry of a heart filled with pain, with deep sadness I express, not for your sake, dear brothers, but to deplore you the conduct of so many priests who not only allow themselves to debate and criticize the wishes of the Pope, but are not embarrassed to reach shameless and blatant disobedience with so much scandal for the good and with so much damage to the souls. This was Pope St. Pius X, Apostolic Union, November 18th, 1912. And how does this play out? What do other saints say about obeying the Pope? St. Catherine of Siena says this: even if the Pope were Satan incarnate, we ought not to raise up our heads against him, but calmly lie down to rest on his bosom. He who rebels against our Father is condemned to death. For that which we do to him, we do to Christ. We honor Christ if we honor the Pope. We dishonor Christ if we dishonor the Pope. I know very well that many defend themselves by boasting. Oh, well, they are so corrupt and work all manner of evil. Sounds like today. But God has commanded that even if the priests, the pastors, and Christ on earth were incarnate devils, we be obedient and subject to them, not for their sakes, but for the sake of God and out of obedience to him. This is St. Catherine of Siena in her writings in St. Catherine of Siena, page 201, 202, and page 222. And you hear people say, oh, no, Catherine Siena stood up to popes. No, she stood up to an anti-pope. And an anti-pope is when there's two popes and one's a false one claiming to be pope. This is not what's happening today. Every cardinal says Pope Francis is a legitimate pope. Pope Benedict said Pope Francis is a legitimate pope. So it's not the same situation. What they're saying today is, yeah, he was elected pope, but he taught heresy, so he's no longer pope. And they take another saint out of context, St. Robert Bellarmine, who said a pope could never teach heresy. But hypothetically, if one did, then he wouldn't be pope. But they never say the part where he says a pope cannot teach heresy. Pope St. Padre Pio, when he was falsely he was falsely accused, and he was disciplined worse than any priest today have been disciplined. Couldn't say a public mass for 12 years. And when he was handed the news from his bishop, he says, the will of my superiors or the will of God. And when all the people came, he didn't start a GoFundMe like James Altman and get $1 million overnight and call the Pope an antichrist like Altman did. No, he told the people, go home. He scolded them. Go home. Don't you dare speak a word against the Pope. You go home and you be obedient to the Pope. This is tradition. This is radical. This is Catholicism. And thought I had, lose track. Now, if you're questioning what I'm saying and you're confused because you think this Pope is liberal, we don't have to obey him, pray that the Holy Spirit opens your eyes to the truth. But in the meantime, God has given us a church who's given us a Bible, but there's also given us a code of canon law to make it simple. It's biblical, it's simple. So just obey canon law. If you want to be a faithful Catholic, obey canon law. And I'm just going to give you two short canon laws that a lot of Catholics are disobeying publicly. It's shameful. Canon law 1373 says this: one who publicly either stirs up hostilities or hatred among subjects against the apostolic see, that's the Pope, or against an ordinary, the bishops, on account of some act of ecclesiastic power or ministry, something they did, in the church, in the ministry, or incite subjects to disobey them, is to be punished by interdict or by other just penalties. So it's against canon law to trash talk the Pope and the bishops. It's the bottom line. We could disagree, we can misunderstood, but we can't trash talk them like people are doing on YouTube for views and money. And then if you're still not sure, here's something really radical and really traditional. Just follow this canon law and you'll be safe from error. Canon law 1404. The first see, again, the Pope, is judged by no one. No one can claim the Pope is a heretic. That is heretical to do. After that Pope is gone, he dies or resigns like Pope Benedict did, the next Pope can declare it, but no one else. Or you're in grave sin. So if you're watching people that are leading you to sin, leading you to disobey canon law, you need to stop watching these people. These people are toxic. They're from the devil. Their lies are from the pit of hell. I exposed a few lies, but I have so many videos exposing more. Like everything this Pope says, they twist and turn, and they just give the wrong interpretation of it, an evil interpretation, because they want us to hate the Pope. Why do they want to hate the Pope? Not because he's a liberal, not because he's a modernist, because he's neither. I just showed you he's neither. This is why a conservative guy like me, a MAGA conservative Catholic, who thinks that we should be following the first 3 centuries of the church, that's traditional, loves Pope Francis and believes he may be a living saint amongst us. Does he want to restrict the Latin Mass? Yes, they're fair. That's true. He does. But his intention isn't because he's mean. He's a meanie. His intention, because he wants unity in the church. He wants unity. Just the reason they started speaking Latin, like I said, was to bring unity. But the Holy Spirit guided Pope Saint Paul VI to write the liturgy for the new Mass, and the reason given was because we need a missionary Mass. We need more evangelistic. And then since that time, since like 1969, when the new Mass was instituted, the church has more than doubled in size. There were 650 million Catholic Christians in 1969. Today there's 1.4 billion. So the Holy Spirit did not make a mistake instituting the new Mass. And it's not going to change, anytime soon, maybe down the line, but we're not going to go back to the Missal 62. So the devil just has you spinning your wheel. You'll always be angry to the point of schism. Where does it lead? It leads to where Vigano is, calling the Pope an antichrist, rebaptizing Catholics, because any baptism after Vatican II was not valid. So like me and you are not valid Catholics in Vigano's eyes. Reordaining priests because he doesn't believe their ordination is good. Him getting reordained as a bishop from twice excommunicated bishop, the late bishop that was excommunicated by Pope Benedict, and then again, by Pope St. John Paul II, and again, Pope Benedict. His name escapes me. He just passed away. Pray for his soul. He's in need of prayer. That's where it leads to. It leads to death. It leads to death. So don't buy this that Pope Francis is a liberal or a modernist. He's not, Politically, there's things I disagree with. Yeah, but I don't think his intentions are because he's a socialist. I think his intentions are because he's a Christian trying to put Christian values into the secular world, into politics. And I do that too. But we have different ideas on how it should be done. But that's politically. We can disagree respectfully. But when it comes to faith and morals, we must be obedient to the Pope. You heard Pope St. Pius call those who are disobedient to the Pope modernists. They're the liberals. They're the modernists. I was going to call this video Rad Trads Are the Real Modernists. But I'm trying to be charitable as I can, because I know most rad trads don't understand this. It's just the guys on YouTube that are lying to them constantly, gaslighting them constantly, where they don't have a minute to catch their breath and do their own research. Because most of these guys on YouTube don't work for a living. They just sit behind a computer all day, researching stuff, twisting words. And then guys that trust them, because they seem like wholesome, good Catholic guys, you know, they hold the traditional family values. And so guys that come home from a hard day's work, they listen to you guys and they just believe them. But I'm saying don't believe them. Pope Francis is not a liberal. Pope Francis is not a socialist. Pope Francis is not a heretic. If anything, Pope Francis is a saint. So pray for this man. And, you know, again, people say, oh, he's 88. Every life is sacred. If you're 88 or 8, the life is both sacred. This is Catholicism. You know, that you're getting into the modernist mindset of euthanasia and all that. It's like, no, we do everything we can. This was our argument with Obama, with death panels. You know, if they're older, just give them a pill, let them die peacefully. No. If my 90-year-old mother, who smokes 2 packs of cigarettes a day, gets pneumonia, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to get the best doctors to save her life, because every life is sacred. Again, this is why you need to go to realestateforlife.org, the only pro-life real estate company out there. God bless and stay Catholic.